All right, welcome. Today, we are diving into two of the most misunderstood and frankly misrepresented figures out there, cherubim and seraphim. And I need you to forget everything you think you know, especially those chubby little babies on Valentine's cards. We're going to peel back all those layers of pop culture and see what the ancient texts actually had to say. And believe me, the reality is so much weirder and more incredible than you can even imagine.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Before we can understand what these beings are, we have to clear away what they're not, and that means tackling one of the most persistent images in all of Western art.
Just take a second and picture it. When I say the word cherub, what's the first thing that pops into your head? I'm willing to bet for, 99% of us, it's that cute, pudgy, winged baby, maybe shooting a little bow and arrow, the kind you see in old paintings or on greeting cards, right?
Well, here is where the record scratch happens. The difference is just staggering. On one side, you've got this harmless little symbol of love, but on the other, the original text described this formidable, four-faced hybrid creature. We're talking part human, part lion, part ox, and part eagle. Their job? Not to make people fall in love, but to guard sacred holy spaces. So yeah, less chubby baby, more like a celestial super guardian. And hey, this huge gap between our modern idea and the ancient description, it's not just a problem with the cherubim. When we turn to the seraphim, the reality is just as, if not more, jaw-dropping. So let's really dig into the cherubim first, because in the original stories, their role is incredibly specific and really important. They are definitely not just floating around as heavenly decoration. So what is their job exactly? Well, they're guardians. You can think of them as the ultimate spiritual security detail. They're the ones blocking the way back to the Tree of Life in Eden with a flaming sword. Their images are literally carved onto the Ark of the Covenant to protect it. And in visions, they are right there, flanking the very throne of God. They exist to protect the boundary between our world and the divine.
And when we get a first-hand description, like the one from the prophet Ezekiel's vision, it is just wild. This isn't some simple angel. It's this incredibly complex, multi-faced being that's part of a larger, almost mechanical structure that serves as the very chariot of God's presence.
And what's so fascinating is that the description of cherubim actually changes depending on the context. You can see it right here. As statues on the ark, they have one face. Carved on the walls of the temple, they have two. But in Ezekiel's incredible, living vision, there are these four-faced creatures covered in eyes. Their form literally adapts to fit their function in the story. Okay, so that's the cherubim. Now let's talk about the seraphim. Now, unlike the cherubim, who pop up in a few different places, the seraphim are really only mentioned in one single incredibly powerful vision in the book of Isaiah. But wow, what a vision it is. You see, their job is totally different from the cherubim. They aren't guarding a boundary. They are attendants in the throne room, right there in God's immediate presence. Their entire purpose seems to be worship, constantly proclaiming God's holiness and serving as agents of divine purification, using fire from the altar. And just look at this description. They have 6 wings, but they're only using 2 of them to actually fly. With the other 4, they cover their faces and their feet. Think about that for a second. It's this profound gesture of reverence, showing that even these powerful, fiery beings have to shield themselves from the full, unfiltered glory of God. It's a really potent image of pure awe. Now, to really get where these amazing images come from, we have to become detectives for a minute. We have to look at the words themselves, because the names are a massive clue to what's really going on. So the name seraphim comes from this Hebrew root word, seraph, and it literally means to burn. Which, makes perfect sense. They're called the burning ones, they're fiery, they're associated with the fire of the altar, but that same word also means something else. And this is where my mind was kind of blown. The exact same Hebrew word, seraph, is used in other parts of the Bible to describe venomous, fiery serpents. Suddenly you have this powerful dual image, a winged, fiery being that's connected to both divine holiness and, at the same time, to deadly divine judgment. It's a symbol that holds both awe and terror.
And you might be thinking, a serpent, where did that come from? Well, this connection probably isn't a coincidence. A lot of scholars point to the influence of nearby Egyptian culture, specifically the uraeus, that's the winged cobra you see on the crowns of the pharaohs. It was a well-known symbol of divine power and authority. So a fiery winged serpent was already part of the cultural vocabulary for power.
And it's the same story with the cherubim.
Their Hebrew name, cherub, is also a direct clue to their job. The word itself is associated with ideas of guarding, covering, or even serving as a chariot. It's a perfect match for every single role we see them play: protector, guardian, and bearer of the divine presence.
Okay, so after looking at all this incredible imagery and the complex history and the language, it all brings us to the biggest question of all. When these ancient writers were describing these beings, were they trying to give us a literal photograph of heaven, or was something else entirely going on?
This is really the heart of the whole debate. Are we talking about actual biological creatures that have 6 wings and 4 faces? Or are these visions powerful metaphors, symbolic language meant to communicate deep truths about God that are just too big for normal words?
So on one side, you have the symbolic argument. This view says, look, these aren't blueprints for actual creatures. The 4 faces of the cherubim, the lion, ox, eagle, human, they represent God's dominion over every part of creation: the wild, the domestic, the air, and humanity. The eyes everywhere represent his all-knowing nature. They are physical symbols for abstract divine qualities.
But then, on the other hand, you have a perspective that's deeply rooted in personal faith and experience. For a lot of people, powerful visions, dreams, and deeply felt spiritual encounters, like the one described here, point to these beings as totally real, conscious entities that can and do interact with our world.
So, let's just pull this all together for a second. We started with cute, chubby babies, and we've ended up with something so much deeper. We've got the cherubim, these bizarre, composite guardians of holy space. And we've got the seraphim, the fiery, 6-winged, serpentine attendants of the divine throne. But whether you see them as literal or symbolic, one thing is clear: they are both powerful attempts to put a face on the majesty and power of God.
And that really leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Maybe the most important question isn't, are these beings real in the way we think of things being real? Maybe the better question is this: are these visions literal blueprints of another dimension, or are they the most powerful, imaginative, and symbolic language that human beings have ever found to try and describe an experience that is, ultimately, indescribable? I'll leave that with you.